How does it work? So when you volunteered, is it that you and Elon and Steve just kind of figure out, let's put a senior person at every part of the administration where there's real opportunity? Why did you end up at SSA versus someplace else?
Interesting question, Chamath. And by the way, it's great to see you guys, man. Thanks for having me on. I can use your laughs. You're really making me laugh.
We're really proud of you, man.
Thank you.
Really proud of you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Suit looks great, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
When do you have to return it?
The rental is due at the end of the week.
Okay.
What happened was I had actually volunteered to go to the VA because that's kind of, as you guys know, close to my heart. And Elon said to me, look, great, you can do that next, but will you go to SSA first and see what's going on there? Because it's the biggest entitlement program we have and see what you find in fraud, waste, and abuse. And so, of course, I said, sure, I'll do that. And I ended up out in Woodland, Maryland with the good people at the SSA, the Social Security Administration. And that's where I started. That's how all this started for me.
And so do you, Antonio, go in there with a DOGE engineer as your kind of sidekick per se, or you just go there solo and you show up and what happens day one when you walk into the place? What do you do?
So I brought with me two great professionals, John and Peyton from Valor. One of them an engineer, the other one I'd say a finance ninja. Both these guys are ninjas. And there was already a team there actually that was working with some great engineers. And one senior person, Scott Coulter, who's actually worked at Lone Pine, started his own fund, and then had come here as a volunteer as well. So they were already doing some work, actually particularly on the enumeration part of the system. So that is the system that you have numbers, the whole cleaning of the database, the numbers. They had already started that project when I got there.
And what is the mandate as given to you, as part of DOGE?
Fraud, waste, and abuse. I mean, exactly what Bill Clinton talked about, what Barack Obama talked about, what all presidents, but maybe President Biden talked about going back in time. It was go figure out how to save some money, man. This system's going bankrupt. It's going to be bankrupt in 2037. The country overall, as you guys know and talked about many times, is on its way toward bankruptcy. You want to do something and go figure out where you can save money and go find the fraud. And that's what we did.
So let's get to it. You spoke at a rally, I think it was on Sunday, and you pulled up a chart. Here is that chart. Maybe you could explain to the American people here what this chart shows.
Yeah, so if I might just step back and say how I got it, because I think it's important. Sure. We map, the way we work, you guys know we're very operational Valor. I've worked with all you guys various times. Yeah. And what we do is we map the entire system from beginning to end. So we map the system from enumeration, that's how you get your number, all the way to the end, went to the offices and saw how the offices operate. And in that process, one of our engineers, Peyton, who I mentioned, he found the data. So we're looking at all the data, enumeration, how it works, what's going on, the typical stuff you'd look at. And he found this data called enumeration beyond entry, right? So it had this giant ramp to it. You can see their baseline was kind of 300,000-400,000 people, all the way up to 2.1 million people, and that just jumped out at us. And we're like, what is that? And so we dug into it, and that's how this started.
And so what that's showing is Social Security numbers that were issued to non-American citizens or non-citizens. Am I correct? That's the number we're looking at. So these are non-citizens getting security numbers. And for people who don't know, just like a little bit of background on the Social Security system, we do this. This is not abnormal for us to give Social Security numbers. This is part of the process that the government does. The Social Security number was created in 1936 for citizens to track their earnings. And in the 90s, we started giving them to non-citizens who were authorized to work in the U.S. so that we could collect taxes from them. And so if you're not a citizen and you're a green card holder, which some people in this program I think have been, you have to have a Social Security number in order to work, and you pay into Social Security and Medicare just like U.S. citizens. And then eventually, I think you would qualify for those over some period of time.
You can also get a Social Security number if you're a legal immigrant into the United States on a visa. So, for example, when I first came to the United States 25 years ago on a TN visa, I was able to get my Social Security number because I had a valid visa to be in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have Social Security numbers being given to non-citizens. That is not controversial, but there's something controversial about this chart. Antonio, tell us what that is.
So I think if you look at the chart, you'll see it starts at call it 300,000 or so.
This is during the COVID period, yeah?
Coming right out of it. So the 21 is coming right out of COVID, right? So if you go back even a couple of years, 19, you'll see that it's about 400,000. Yeah, exactly 350 right there. So what happened was this program was designed for So what we're talking about, people that got visas, this is at enumeration beyond entry. So this is after you're in. There are some people in here that have H-1Bs, green cards, et cetera. And the way we thought about this was that's the baseline number. That's the 300,000 to 400,000 a year you see. And that should be happening. That's like, there are programs for Afghans, example, the translators that came in after the war, right? The people we brought in, they would be in these kinds of programs. And so the baseline number, and by the program goes back, this particular program goes back all the way to 17, and it had a legitimate use, which was the kind of people we're talking about. People that we want to let in, like the CARE program, I'll make an example, which are the Afghans, they would be in this number. And so what jumped out at us wasn't that this is here because it has legitimate use. It's that it's the growth. Why did it grow this fast? And what happened? That's what we dug into.
Have you figured that out yet? Is it because of like a COVID overhang? The one criticism I did see of the chart that I wanted to bring up with you is, hey, people want to see the 10 years, 20 years before this. What would we see if we were to look backwards a little bit? And do you have some theories? And is the COVID overhang theory valid? Or is this just Biden opened the border, as we saw, especially like in maybe it was that third year of his term, the 2023 year, and this is the overhang of the 2023 surge? What are your theories?
Well, the answer is no, categorically no, because the program really started, it started in 2017. So they probably worked on it before that, right? It takes a few years to put these into place. They worked at it, my guess is, back during the Obama administration. It actually became active in 17. You see a few numbers in 18, and it starts to get a little bigger in 19 and 20, right? So that's how we get this baseline number of 19 and 20. That's where we're using that data here. So there isn't, I can't go back 20 years. It doesn't exist. And then when we dug into it, what we found was the vast majority of the growth was related to asylum programs and parolees and people that came in on NTAs, this is notice to appear, into the country, either at the border or at the airports, mostly at the border. And then we dug further into it, we found that this is about 5.4 million people total. There were about 1.2 million people that the status was marked as unknown, and about 1.2 million people that were marked as general parole. And they should have markings of, what the program is they're under. Because if you claim asylum, you're supposed to claim like a real fear. I'm going to be tortured by my country. Something bad's going to happen to me. It's why I can't go home. What we find here is that a legitimate program was, in the word I'll use, abused. The requirements were like super opened so that more people come through. And the example I'll give you, I have here actually the form. The form used to be, going back in time, a 4-page form that the officer had to fill out in the field. And the person that was claiming asylum had to actually prove that they had a really credible fear of being, murdered, tortured by their government. That's something bad would happen. That's what the sign's for. It turned into a form, which I can't give you, but I'm going to show you here. If you zoom in on it, it has 4 questions. That's it. And the 4 questions are super leading. I'll just read the one of the important ones here, right? So, do you have any reason for a concern about being returned to your home country or being removed from the United States? I mean, could that be more leading? Right. Yeah. What they did is they just opened the aperture on these programs dramatically. So they allowed people that were illegals at the border to come in legally. And as we've dug further into it, we found this took us. So you guys know me, man. I'm a very methodical, lean business process mapper. And we went all the way to the border, literally to Brownsville and Laredo, to ask what happened. We couldn't find the data on what these unknown categories were. And it turns out that when the folks at the border, who were great, by the way, they really tried hard and they suffered a lot in this. This is a human tragedy I haven't talked about. They were giving people at times notices to appear. This is the NTA. And what that allows you to do is come in the country and then you're scheduled a court date, which is like 6 years out. So now you're in the country with some quasi-legal status. You're waiting for your court date. And while you're waiting for your court date, which could be 6 years out is the average, by the way, it could be longer than that. You're waiting for your court date. You could fill out an asylum application. So without even an interview, just an application by filing a form. Once the application's in, you can file another form, 765, to get a work authorization. Once you get that, you get a 766, which is the authorization, and we automatically send you a Social Security card in the mail. No interview at all. That is the majority of the growth you see in these numbers.
Is there any ID verification along the way, Antonio? Like, do we know that there are no duplications happening by validating that one individual is getting one Social Security number at any point in this process?
So it's a great question. No, the answer is there's no real ID verification. So you can, one of the things we found when we looked at this was the people that some people showed IDs, some people didn't. And one of the things
these would be IDs, Antonio, from their home country. This would be a Venezuelan driver's license or something.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a passport, a driver's license. But here's what really sort of tipped us off and disturbed us. When we looked at the birth certificate data that was presented at the border, the number one birth date was 1/1, and it was 4 times more likely to be born on 1/1 than any other day of the year. Now, we all know this isn't true.
So they just hit enter on that part of the form.
Or they had nothing. They also could come with nothing.
Do we take biometrics of people at the border? Do we take like an iris scan, fingerprints, and all that stuff?
This is one of the issues. I mean, we do have photos of people. We found that 23% of the records looked at did not have fingerprints. And look, the folks at the border were overwhelmed. And we're not sure why this happened. I will tell you guys, just to understand, when I went down there, both Border Patrol and Border Protection told me they had the highest suicide rates of all time during the surge. Okay, over 70 of these agents committed suicide in this period. It's truly tragic because they knew what was going on.
Given the fact that all this has happened, is the Trump administration going to try to claim the Social Security numbers back, invalidate them? What will be the proper action, or is it too late? Or they're already sort of in the system and now you can't do anything about it?
So, Ben, it's a great question, right? And the first question was, what are they doing? I mean, like, where are these people? Where are they? How are they? And we've gone through a whole process of mapping this. So we mapped it through to the benefit programs. We found in the benefit programs that every benefit program we looked at was being accessed by these people. 1.3 million of them are on Medicaid right now, today. And by the way, it's just ramping. It's just starting, just to give you a point. And then out of curiosity, I woke up at night like 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. My mind was running on this. I sent the engineers a note saying, hey guys, let's just look at the public voter rolls, see what we find in some friendly states. And we looked at the voter rolls and we found that thousands of them were registered to vote in a handful of states. And then we went even further with those friendly states and found that many of those people had actually voted. It was shocking to us. And if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. And so now the question we're asking ourselves is, what do we do? We've referred some to prosecution. That's ongoing right now. We're thinking through how to do it. And the reality is they have various kinds of status, and it's a very detailed analysis legally that we're working through right now about how to deal with it.
So thousands of those people registered to vote.
Yes.
In the election.
Which is a federal crime, by the way.
Well, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is like the Heritage Foundation has a very good project. It's obviously right-leaning, where they're studying all cases of fraud. I looked at it before we were here. There's only been 24 cases since 2003 of somebody who's a non-citizen trying to vote. Now, those are people caught. So this would be incredibly dramatic if it was even 1,000 people.
Oh, no, Jason, it's more than 1,000. I've seen it. I've seen the data myself, and it's more than 1,000 in just a couple of states. I mean, it is shockingly bad. And this is the tip of the iceberg, guys. It's the tip of the iceberg. This doesn't include these 7.8 million people that ICE has that have come in illegally and know are here, and all the people that came illegally we don't know are here. I mean, this is not a political issue. I want to be really clear about this.
Yeah, Antonio,
this is about America.
Let's just take one step back because I just want you to repeat this. So, because I think it's important and we may have just run over it a little too quickly. When you get a Social Security number, what you're saying is there's all of these important downstream consequences. One of the downstream consequences is you could show up, register to vote, and that's an illegitimate action that's breaking federal law. That's one. But the second is that without knowing who this person is, they can start to absorb resources that could have otherwise gone to an American. I guess that's like a fundamental part of this.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
How do you quantify that? Can you just maybe explain it a little bit more about all of the different ways in which you think now, the United States ends up leaking services to these folks?
And also they could be contributing too, right? They could be paying taxes into the system. So I guess there's both of those possibilities, and both of those have fingerprints to them up. So yeah, good question.
Look, we need to figure this out. This is it's massively complex. You can see the map I have on the whiteboard in our office. It's huge. And we're figuring it out right now. But let me just tell you this. In every benefit program we looked at, and this is just a handful of states, we found people on all the benefit programs. And we found them on unemployment. We found them on Medicaid. So, Jason, to your point, the people on Medicaid and unemployment, they're not contributing. They're taking out, they're mooching, right? Sure. There are criminals. I mean, look, we sent this data list to the National Targeting Center. I don't want to get too far into the data, but I can tell you they found hard hits in the Targeting Center of very bad people, criminals and people on the terrorist watch list that are in this group. And so yeah, I mean, it's a problem. We got to figure out how to deal with it. And of course, there are people that are also, have jobs and paying in the system. That's also true. All these things are true. And we're trying to sort through the data and figure out how to actually deal with it now.
Antonio, one of the things about the data that you triggered, which, because the data is so important, frankly, is a lot of people started to try to find a way to nitpick and say, Antonio, you're cherry picking, or Antonio, this is not really representative. And you had some pretty big names, right? People that have credibility, Jim Chanos probably being one of the more prolific people, a very well-known hedge fund manager. But I think you tried to articulate why their objections didn't make any sense. I think it's important to maybe give you a few moments here to identify what they said and maybe debunk it.
I mean, so the chart that they're using, and you can see this, I posted something on X about this. It was apples to oranges. You can see it here. They took a chart that included all enumerations, not the EBE program, the enumeration beyond entry program, all enumerations, and compared to our chart. So they put
so just to be clear, this would have included somebody like me coming in on a TN visa or somebody on an EB1 visa.
Yeah, I mean, so those people would be in our data too, but just enumerated beyond entry. The data on the left, up to 2020 with the big bars, that includes people in the offices. That includes people who got Social Security numbers because they went to a consulate and, like you probably did, applied ahead of time before they came in. Those kinds of people.
So we need a stacked bar chart. So there's some fun with numbers going on.
Can you flip back again? So your number for 24 was how much? 2.1 million. Right?
Yep. And what they did is they took our data. So this was, look, I don't want to impute negative motives. They just maybe were confused. They took our data and they added the total data, right? This is just subsection. This is EB. And I'm just going to use the acronyms. Okay, guys. This is EB only, enumeration beyond entry, which is a program, as I said, started in 2017. And then it kind of ramped up into 19. They took our data and then they added the total data before that, right? That is apples to oranges. That's why it doesn't work. And I went through a whole analysis of this on X, and the first person that posted the chart actually deleted it and sent me a post saying, "Hey, I'm deleting it because I get it. You're right," and apologized and asked me some questions. I don't want to get into you guys know I don't post a lot on X. I don't want to get into debates with people. It's not worth it. The data speaks for itself.
It basically became like a Rorschach test where people that did not want to believe the points you were making latched on to that chart that was shown, even though it was disproven. And that became the narrative for a good chunk of the internet and a good chunk for media response to this.
I mean,